The city was drowning in silver light as midnight settled over the steel towers of Valemont. Inside the top-floor penthouse of the most powerful man in the city, silence ruled, except for the distant hum of luxury. Marble floors gleamed, panoramic windows glowed, and every corner whispered of a life untouched by hunger or hardship. That was why the small sound hit him like a crack in glass. A rustle, a gasp, something, or someone moving where no one should be. Billionaire Adrian Hale, a man known as much for his icy brilliance as for the empire he built from dust, paused at the kitchen entrance. He had risen from his study to get water, but fate had other plans. The cold light from the fridge spilled across the expensive tile, illuminating a tiny shadow curled beside the island counter. A girl, barefoot, thin, eyes wide like a frightened fawn. She froze when she saw him, her small hands clutching a container of leftovers as if it were treasure. He recognized her instantly. Lena, the 6-year-old daughter of Maria, his maid, the woman who had quietly served his household for 3 years without a complaint, despite the exhaustion in her eyes that no one ever cared to question. Adrian's heartbeat stalled. What was she doing here at this hour? And why did she look like she hadn't eaten in days? Before he could speak, Lena pressed herself against the cabinet, whispering, "Please, I wasn't stealing. I was so hungry. Mama told me not to touch anything, but she hasn't eaten either." Her voice trembled, each word slicing through the billionaire's guarded chest. Adrian had seen hunger before, but only from behind tinted car windows, from the safe distance of someone who had climbed out of poverty early and erased every memory of it. He had never expected to witness it in his own kitchen. "Where is your mother?" His voice, normally cold enough to chill a room, came out softer than he intended. Lena bit her lip. "She's still cleaning the guest rooms. She said she'd eat after finishing everything. I didn't want to bother her. I just wanted a little food, so she won't get in trouble for giving me any." Her innocence was a blow straight to the gut. Adrian stepped forward. The girl immediately flinched. He stopped. That tiny recoil, the way her shoulders tightened, told him a story he had never asked to know. One of fear, of nights spent waiting for a mother who worked too hard for too little, of meals skipped so her child could survive, of a world where luxury existed only to be cleaned, never enjoyed. "Lena," he said quietly, "come here." She shook her head, eyes shining with tears. "I'll go, sir. I promise. Please don't send Mama away." She didn't know I left the small room. Adrian exhaled, and something inside him cracked open like old stone. He knelt, a billionaire, kneeling on cold marble for a child who wasn't even supposed to be seen. "I'm not sending your mother away." His voice was firm now, but warm. "And you're not leaving hungry." Her lips trembled. "Really? Really?" He reached toward the counter and gently took the container from her hands. Then he stood and began warming the food, slowly, deliberately, while she watched with wide, disbelieving eyes. The hum of the microwave felt like thunder in the quiet kitchen. When he placed the plate in front of her at the huge dining table, one meant for grand parties and million-dollar deals, she hesitated. "I can't sit here," she whispered. "Mama said this table is not for us." Adrian pulled out a chair. "Tonight it is." Lena climbed up, hands trembling, and took her first bite with the quiet desperation of someone who had forgotten what it meant to eat until she was full. Adrian watched, something twisting inside him, guilt, maybe, or shame, or a long-buried memory of being a hungry boy himself before the world changed. He hadn't felt like this in years. When Lena finally slowed down, he asked gently, "Does this happen often?" She didn't look up. "Mama says it's okay. She says other people have it harder." Adrian's jaw tightened. He didn't realize Maria had entered the kitchen doorway until he heard her choked whisper, "Sir, please," she didn't mean. She froze at the sight before her. Her employer standing beside her daughter, the leftovers warmed, the chair pulled out, the world shifted in a way she could not fathom. Adrian turned toward her. His face was unreadable. Maria's breath hitched. "Maria," he said slowly, "we need to talk." Her hand shook. "If you want me to leave, I will. Just please, let me take her with me. Don't punish her." I'm not firing you. Maria's eyes widened. Then what? But Adrian didn't answer immediately. He studied the fragile woman, the thin wrists, the tired eyes, the way she stood like someone ready for the next blow life might hurl. Something dark curled in his gut. How long had he overlooked this? How long had this suffering been happening right under his roof? Before he could speak, a sudden noise echoed down the hallway. The sound of a door closing, soft but sharp enough to draw his eyes. Someone else had heard them. Someone who shouldn't have been awake. And as Adrian stepped forward to investigate, unaware that this night would unravel secrets buried deeper than hunger, the shadows shifted behind him. Adrian walked toward the corridor, each step echoing in the stillness of the penthouse. The soft click of that door replayed in his mind. Too precise, too deliberate to be the wind or an accidental draft. Someone had been listening. Someone who shouldn't have been awake at this hour. He glanced back once. Lena was staring after him with wide eyes, her small fingers wrapped around the fork, as if the world might snatch the food away at any moment. Maria stood frozen, guilt and fear etched into her bones. "Stay here," he said quietly, though his voice carried the weight of a man who had just realized something was terribly out of balance in his own home. The hallway stretched long and dim, lit only by the elegant sconces that cast warm amber halos across the walls. Adrian's pulse thrummed harder the closer he got to the guest wing. His penthouse was guarded, monitored, staff-checked daily. Privacy was a rule carved in stone. So who had been awake? And why were they listening? He reached the door, the one he was certain had shut moments earlier. The handle was slightly warm, as if touched only seconds ago. He pushed it open. Darkness. He stepped inside, letting his eyes adjust. It was one of the smaller guest rooms, scarcely used. Clean, pristine, untouched, except for a faint shift in the curtains by the balcony. Adrian moved closer, pulling them aside. Nothing, but the lock on the balcony door, normally secured, was unlatched. Adrian's jaw clenched. Someone had definitely been here. He returned to main room, studying it with sharper eyes. The faint indentation on the carpet near the bed, the slight tilt of the desk chair that he never remembered being touched. Whoever had stood here didn't come to rest. They came to observe. His penthouse had 42 security cameras. He should have checked them, but something inside him held him back. An instinct. He wanted to see more before he confronted the invisible presence weaving through his home. As he turned to leave, something caught his attention, a thin glimmer beneath the bedside table. He bent down, reaching into the shadows. His fingers brushed cold metal. A key, but not just any key. It was part of the old mechanical lock system he had removed last year, keys that had been decommissioned and stored away. No one should have access to them. No one. He straightened, gripping the key tighter as he headed back down the hall. His mind was working rapidly now, the way it did when he sensed a threat in business. Calculating, scanning, fitting the puzzle pieces. Something wasn't right in his household. Something had been happening behind the scenes while he remained buried in meetings, numbers, and the comfort of being untouchable. But now a hungry child had forced him to look again. As he approached the kitchen, he heard low murmurs, Maria's trembling apology, Lena's soft attempt to comfort her. But there was someone else too. Another voice. Calm baritone, and entirely unexpected at this hour. Adrian's eyes narrowed as he stepped into the room. Standing across the counter with Jacob, his longtime head of household staff. Trusted, professional, efficient to a fault. He managed everything from schedules to maintenance, his eyes sharp, his posture military straight. "What's happening?" Jacob asked, glancing between Maria and the child with a look that flickered between disapproval and feigned concern. Adrian watched him closely. Maria stiffened at Jacob's presence. Lena clutched her arm. Interesting. Jacob noticed their reaction too, and masked his expression a little too quickly. "I heard voices," he continued. "Is everything all right?" His tone was perfectly polite. Too polite. Adrian placed a mysterious key on the counter. Jacob's eyes flicked to it. A brief, sharp movement. "You were in the east guest room," Adrian said calmly. Jacob blinked. "Sir?" "No. I was completing the nightly checklist in the service corridor." Adrian stepped closer, his voice still level but now edged with steel. You're certain? Yes, sir. Strange, Adrian murmured, because I found this there. He tapped the key with a finger. That tiny metallic sound felt like a crack of thunder. Maria's breath caught. Lena clung tighter. Jacob's jaw twitched, barely noticeable, but Adrian saw it. That key, Jacob said after a beat, could have been left there from before the renovations. Perhaps the cleaners. No one cleans the guest rooms at midnight. Adrian cut in quietly. A silence stretched tight around them, fragile as glass. Then Jacob straightened. Sir, with all due respect, I think you're overthinking. I don't overthink, Adrian replied. I observe. Maria lowered her gaze, as though afraid of what might come next. Lena's fingers trembled around her fork. The room's warm light suddenly felt too bright, too revealing. Adrian picked up the key again and turned to Maria. How often do you and your daughter go without eating? The question made Jacob stiffen before Maria could even answer. Maria swallowed. Sir, it's not your burden. We manage. That's not an answer. Her voice cracked. Many days, sir. Adrian felt something dark coil inside him. He shifted his gaze to Jacob. And you were responsible for staff well-being, were you not? Jacob's expression hardened. With all due respect, sir, staff meals are provided. If Maria chooses to give hers away or skip them. That's enough, Adrian said quietly. Jacob fell silent. Lena's soft voice suddenly floated into the tension. Mama didn't skip. They wouldn't give her food today. They said it wasn't her turn. Adrian's breath froze. His eyes snapped to Jacob. Jacob didn't flinch this time. His mask was back on. Sir, the staff rotation. There is no staff rotation on meals, Adrian said. His voice was no longer cold. It was frigid, dangerous. Not in my building. Not in my home. Maria's eyes brimmed with tears she had held back for far too long. Sir, I don't want trouble. You're not in trouble, Adrian said. But someone was. Jacob opened his mouth again, but Adrian spoke first. The key, he said, turning in his hand, was in a room no one should enter. You lied about where you were. A child in my home is hungry. My staff is mistreated. His voice dropped, dark and controlled. Do you want to try explaining again? Jacob's composure slipped this time. A crack, but enough. Something else flickered in those eyes. Something cold, calculated. A truth that had been waiting in the shadows. Maria stepped back instinctively, pulling Lena with her. Adrian sensed it too, the danger rising in the quiet. Jacob didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared at Adrian Hale with a look the billionaire had never seen from him before. And in that silence, Adrian realized, whatever was happening in his house went far deeper than hunger. Jacob's stare was unnerving. Not loud, not hostile, but calculating in a way that crawled beneath the skin. A man who had spent years bowing his head now looked at Adrian with a quiet defiance that didn't belong to an employee. It belonged to someone who believed he had leverage. Someone who believed he was safe. Adrian stepped closer, his eyes locked on the man he had trusted with keys, access codes, even the security schedule. Jacob didn't back away. He didn't blink. Instead, his lips curved, just barely, into a smile that chilled the air between them. Sir, Jacob said softly, you're tired. You've had a long day. Perhaps you are misinterpreting the situation. Maria instinctively pulled Lena behind her, as if shielding her from something she suddenly sensed but had never allowed herself to notice before. Lena's small hand trembled in her mother's. Adrian didn't move. His voice dropped, low and controlled. Try again. Jacob sighed, not nervously but almost bored, as though he'd been waiting for this moment, as though the mask he had worn for years had finally grown too tight. Very well, he said. But I suggest we speak privately. Anything you have to say, Adrian replied, can be said here. Jacob's smile deepened, not friendly, sharper. Are you sure? Because the truth tend to make noise. Adrian's patience began to fray. Speak. Jacob looked at Maria, at Lena, at the key in Adrian's hand. And then, slowly, he leaned against the counter as if settling into a conversation he'd rehearsed. "I run this household," Jacob began. "Every detail, every schedule, every staff member. You gave me that authority, sir, and with authority comes decisions. Denying a mother food is not a decision," Adrian said. "It's cruelty. Is it?" Jacob tilted his head slightly. "Or is it discipline? Order? Resource management? You weren't here to see the issues, sir. The extra staff your company cut funding for, the shortages, the costs rising, the pressure on the household budget you never reviewed. Someone had to control consumption." Maria stared at him, horrified. "You ration our meals? You made us share one plate for 3 days." Jacob shrugged. "Efficiency?" Adrian felt heat ignite in his chest, rising to his throat. Maria had been starving. Lena had been hiding to eat scraps. And Jacob, a man who earned 10 times what Maria did, had been deciding who deserved food? The billionaire's fingers tightened around the key. "And what about this?" he asked. "Explain why you were in a private room not meant for staff." Jacob's eyes flicked to it again. This time, he didn't hide the flicker of irritation. "Observation, sir. To protect you. To ensure no unauthorized activity happens at night. It's my job." "No," Adrian said, voice icy. "Your job is to follow the protocols I approved. Not to wander through the private sections of my home. And certainly not to hide while eavesdropping." Jacob's jaw flexed. "You think I was hiding?" "You weren't walking openly," Adrian replied. "You shut the door when you heard us." For a moment, Jacob didn't answer. Then he began pacing slowly around the counter, his steps steady, deliberate. Every sound seemed amplified by the tension in the room. When he stopped, he was only a few feet from Maria and Lena, both recoiled as if from a predator. Jacob noticed and smirked. "You're afraid," he said softly to Maria. "Interesting. After all these years." Adrian stepped forward sharply. "Stay away from them." Jacob held up his hands lightly. "I'm not touching anyone. I'm simply stating a fact." "The only fact," Adrian said, "is that you're done here." Silence fell. For the first time, genuine shock flickered across Jacob's face. "You're firing me?" "Yes." Jacob blinked once, then twice, and then his expression smoothed into something unreadable, too unreadable. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "No," Adrian replied. "I'm correcting one." Jacob nodded slowly, almost as if he respected the line, but the glint in his eyes said otherwise. He walked toward the exit of the kitchen, but just before stepping out, he paused and looked back. "You're a good man, sir," Jacob said, voice eerily calm. "But good men don't survive long in houses filled with secrets." Adrian's stare hardened. "Get out." Jacob left without another word. The moment the door closed behind him, Maria collapsed onto the nearest chair, covering her face with her hands. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I should have told you. I should have." "You didn't do anything wrong," Adrian said firmly. Lena climbed into her mother's lap, pressing her tiny head against Maria's chest. Maria held her tight, trembling. Adrian took a slow breath, steadying the fury that hadn't quite settled. Jacob's words echoed in his mind. Houses filled with secrets. He turned to Maria. "How long has this been happening?" "All of it." Maria wiped her tears. "Months, sir. Maybe longer. He controlled everything. The schedules. The rooms we could enter. Even the portions of food. If anyone questioned him, he cut their hours, or threatened to fire them." Adrian felt a cold realization grip him. Jacob had built a small kingdom inside his home, one he ruled without oversight. A kingdom of fear. And Adrian had been too busy building empires elsewhere to notice. He crouched beside Maria's chair. "From now on, no one mistreats you. Or Lena. Not in my home. Not ever." Maria broke into fresh tears, soft, shocked, relieved. But before he could say more, a soft sound echoed from the hallway. A thud. Then another. Slow. Heavy. Footsteps. Not Jacob's. Someone else. Someone moving toward the kitchen. Adrian rose, alert. Maria pulled Lena close again. The footsteps stopped just beyond the doorway, and a shadow stretched across the floor. Someone had been here too. Someone who heard everything. And as the figure stepped into view, Adrian's blood ran cold, because it was the last person he expected to see in his home at this hour, watching him with an expression he couldn't decipher. The figure stepped fully into the light, and for a heartbeat the entire room went silent, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Evelyn Hale, Adrian's younger sister, smart, sharp-tongued, brilliant enough to run any corporation in the city, but too restless for boardrooms. She traveled constantly, showed up without warning, and carried an aura of unpredictable fire wherever she went. But tonight, something was different. She wasn't wearing her usual confidence. Her expression wasn't amused, curious, or irritated. It was grim, bordering on disturbed. "What?" she asked quietly, eyes shifting between Adrian, Maria, and the trembling Lena. "Is going on in this house?" Maria stiffened. She wasn't used to Evelyn. Few staff were. Evelyn had the kind of energy that made people instinctively stand straighter, as if judged by a higher temperature flame. Adrian exhaled slowly. "Why are you awake?" Evelyn walked closer, ignoring the question. "I heard voices. Raised ones." Jacob stormed out like someone who just swallowed poison. She turned to Adrian, her voice sharpening. "What did he do?" Maria opened her mouth, then hesitated. Evelyn noticed instantly. "Speak freely," she said gently to her. Maria swallowed. "Miss, he has been restricting our food, threatening staff, controlling everything behind your brother's back. And tonight he was spying." Evelyn froze. Then her jaw tightened with a fury, so sharp it almost glowed. "That man has been running this penthouse like a kingdom," Adrian added. "And I just found proof he's been entering secured rooms at night." Evelyn looked at him sharply. "What rooms?" "The East Guest Suite." Her expression flickered. Just barely. But Adrian caught it. "You know something," he said. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the counter, picked up the old key Adrian had placed there, turned it over in her hand, and let out a breath that wasn't relief but resignation. "That key wasn't supposed to exist anymore," she murmured. "I know," Adrian said, "which means someone retrieved it." Maria held Lena tighter. "Miss, is something wrong with the house?" Evelyn hesitated before shaking her head slightly. "Not the house." Her eyes locked onto Adrian's, deep, direct, searching for something she feared was already true. "It's Jacob," she said quietly. "I've been trying to get a read on him for months. He's too polished, too perfect. People like that aren't loyal, they're strategic." Adrian stepped closer, his voice low. "Strategic for what?" Evelyn pressed the key into his palm. "For someone." The room chilled. Maria covered Lena's ears instinctively. Adrian's voice hardened. "Say it." Evelyn swallowed. "I think he's working for one of your competitors." Maria gasped softly. "But why would they care about a maid or the staff meals?" Evelyn's gaze shifted toward the hallway Jacob had disappeared down. "Because the easiest place to bury a bigger crime is under a smaller one." Adrian felt his stomach drop. "Meaning?" he demanded. Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Meaning Jacob didn't care about starving the staff. That was just a distraction. It kept everyone focused on survival instead of observation." Adrian's muscles tensed. "Observation of what?" Evelyn held his gaze, the first hints of fear showing through her calm facade. "Adrian, I think Jacob has been planting listening devices." Maria gasped again, clutching Lena as if the walls themselves might turn against them. Adrian shook his head instantly. "Impossible. I control the security systems. Every sweep is monitored." "Except," Evelyn countered, "the mechanical areas you don't personally inspect. The utility shafts, the old vents, the discontinued wiring tunnels built when this place was constructed 50 years ago. You never had them renovated. You left them dormant." Adrian froze. Dormant meant forgotten. Forgotten meant vulnerable. Lena tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, what's happening?" Maria shushed her, voice trembling. Adrian's pulse pounded in his ears. You think he's been spying on me for business intel? Evelyn nodded. It's the only thing that makes sense. His behavior, his access, his timing. Competitors would pay a fortune for your private meetings, strategy calls. And my home, Adrian finished, was the one place I felt secure enough to conduct them. Suddenly, everything sharpened. The strange misplacements, the subtle movements, the faint electrical hums he had dismissed, Jacob's inhuman ability to appear whenever he was needed, and when he wasn't. It all fit. Maria whispered, "Sir." He knew everything. He always knew when someone complained. He always knew when someone cried. I thought he was just strict. Evelyn looked at Adrian. He wasn't just strict. He was listening. Adrian's chest tightened with a rising storm. Where is he now? Evelyn's eyes flicked toward the hallway. He didn't take the main elevator. I heard the side service door open. Adrian cursed under his breath. The service corridor led to the old maintenance shaft, and the maintenance shaft led to his private study, where he kept files not stored on any server, where he had held confidential calls with global partners, where the real power of his empire lived, locked behind biometric systems. But if Jacob had found a way in, Adrian didn't waste another second. He strode toward the hallway, every movement sharp with controlled fury. "Evelyn," he ordered, "stay with Maria and Lena. Don't let anyone in. Not staff, not security, no one." Evelyn nodded. "Be careful." He didn't answer. He reached the service corridor door, pushed it open, and the cold draft hit him instantly. The lights flickered. The metallic hum of the old elevator echoed faintly below. Jacob was already moving. Adrian stepped inside, heart pounding. He didn't know what he would find. He didn't know what Jacob truly wanted. But he did know one thing. Whatever Jacob had been hiding, this night was about to expose everything. The metal walls of the service corridor seemed to close in around Adrian as he descended the narrow stairwell 2 steps at a time. The air grew colder, heavier, carrying the scent of forgotten spaces, dust, steel, and something else he couldn't quite place. The hum below deepened. The old maintenance elevator. Jacob was using it. He shouldn't have been able to. Adrian reached the landing just as the elevator's cage groaned its way down the shaft. He leaned over the railing, watching the flicker of the elevator light disappear into the darkness. He wasn't far behind. He pushed through the lower door leading into the maintenance level, a massive concrete underbelly of the penthouse that few even knew existed. The lights here were dull and intermittent, casting long shadows that stretched like dark fingers across the floor. Adrian moved quickly, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. He followed the fading glow of the elevator shaft indicator until he reached a dead-end hallway. Not a real dead end, just a visual facade. At the far end was a square metal panel embedded into the wall, old and worn from its days before renovations began. A panel only one person in this house, besides him, knew how to open. Jacob had done his homework. Adrian pressed his palm against the icy surface. The panel was still vibrating faintly, the aftershock of being opened moments ago. He slid his fingers along its edges until he found the small indentation where a tool could pry it loose. But Jacob had already removed the seal, which meant Adrian pushed the panel, and it opened with a metallic click. Behind it, a long tunnel stretched ahead, dark, narrow, and originally designed for electricians and maintenance crews decades earlier. Perfect for hiding, perfect for wiring, perfect for surveillance. Adrian stepped inside. The temperature dropped further, hitting him like a splash of icy water. The tunnel walls were lined with old conduits, silent and dormant. But as Adrian walked deeper, he noticed the new wires, fresh, modern, expertly installed. Jacob hadn't started this recently. This had been happening for months, maybe years. He clenched his jaw, fury twisting inside him like a tightening blade. He reached the end of the tunnel where a faint sliver of light seeped through the edges of a newer panel, one that led directly into his private study. Jacob was in there. He was sure of it. Adrian pressed an ear to the panel. A soft rustling. A faint beep digital. Not the sound of someone rifling through files, but someone extracting data. Every muscle in Adrian's body tensed. He pushed the panel open in one sharp motion and stepped through and froze. Jacob stood at the center of the study, crouched beside Adrian's locked file cabinet, a sleek electronic device connected to biometric pad. A device Adrian had never seen before, one powerful enough to bypass even corporate security systems. Jacob didn't flinch. He didn't jump. He didn't even look startled. Instead, he rose slowly, turned, and faced Adrian with the same calmness he had worn earlier, as if he were merely clocking in for his morning shift. "Sir," Jacob said, smoothing his sleeves, "you're faster than I expected." Adrian stepped forward. "What the hell are you doing in my study?" Jacob glanced at the device, then at the sealed cabinet. "You already know." "Say it," Adrian demanded. His voice was low, lethal. Jacob sighed, almost disappointed. "Fine. I'm obtaining information." "Stealing," Adrian corrected. "Collecting," Jacob countered. "For parties who value it far more than you realize." "You work for me?" Adrian said, incredulous. "You lived under my roof." Jacob tilted his head. "Exactly. The best vantage point. No one suspects the help, sir. They walk past us. They undervalue us. They trust us too easily. That gives you the right to starve people?" Jacob's eyes flickered. "Collateral. Keeping them weak kept them quiet. A harsh truth, but effective." Adrian's fist tightened. "You endangered a child." For the first time, Jacob hesitated. A small, unreadable shadow passed over his expression, but it vanished just as quickly. "I did what I had to do," he said coldly. "This intel will change the landscape of your corporation, and others will pay greatly for it. Enough to secure a retirement far beyond what you ever offered me." "You were paid generously," Adrian snapped. "Generously?" Jacob raised a brow. "I made your home perfect for years, yet I was invisible, replaceable. I simply chose to make myself irreplaceable." Adrian took another step toward him. "You're going to prison." Jacob laughed softly, too softly. "No, I'm going to walk out of here with what I came for." "No, Jacob, you're done." Adrian's voice was ice. Jacob met his eyes calmly. "You think you can stop me? You're alone down here. Your sister, the maid, the little girl, they're upstairs. You won't risk a fight that puts them in danger." Adrian didn't blink. "Try me?" Jacob raised the device in one hand. "If I smash this, the failsafe uploads everything wirelessly. You can't stop that either." Adrian froze. Jacob smiled. But then, something shifted. A new sound. A whisper-soft footstep behind the bookshelf. Adrian's heart jumped. Jacob's head snapped toward the sound. And before either of them could react, a voice spoke from the shadows of the study, low and steady. "Actually, he's not alone." The person stepped out slowly, and Jacob's eyes widened for the first time. Adrian inhaled sharply, because the figure emerging from the dim light wasn't Evelyn, wasn't a guard, wasn't anyone Jacob had calculated for. It was someone Jacob never expected to see standing inside Adrian Hale's most private room. Someone who should not have been able to bypass the locks, the sensors, the alarms, yet had done so with alarming ease. And as the figure stepped forward, the air in the study grew electric, charged with the weight of secrets that had been buried far too long. Daniel froze when he saw the door crack open again. A small shadow slipped through, careful, silent, almost rehearsed in the art of not being noticed. It was Anna. Her thin frame moved with a kind of weary precision, as though she learned long ago that the world punished any sound she made. She didn't see him. Her eyes darted to the counter where the box pastries still sat, her lips pressed together with a mix of guilt and desperation. She reached out, fingers trembling, to take just one, just enough to quiet the ache in her stomach. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, and the motion startled her. The pastry slipped from her hand and fell to the floor, scattering crumbs. She jerked back, spine stiff, eyes wide with fear, as if she expected him to shout or scold or worse. But Daniel didn't raise his voice. He crouched down slowly, picked up the pastry, and set it gently on the table. "Anna," he said softly, "why didn't you tell me you were hungry?" Her mouth opened, but her voice refused to come out. She shook her head quickly, as though terrified of offending him with the truth. "You're not in trouble," he reassured. "I'm not angry." She hugged her small arms against her chest, almost making herself smaller. "Mama said we should never ask for food. That we already stayed too long. That we are lucky you let us breathe here." Daniel's chest tightened. The idea that someone in his home, someone under his roof, felt grateful for the chance to breathe struck him like a punch. "Anna, you're not a burden. You hear me?" She nodded, but he could tell she didn't believe it. Before he could speak again, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the hallway. Rose appeared, panic in her eyes, hair still dripping from the bathroom faucet, where she clearly rushed to wash her face. When she saw Anna standing beside him, her expression crumpled. "Senor Daniel, I'm so sorry," she blurted out. "She wasn't supposed to be here. I told her never to. Anna, mi amor, come here." But Daniel raised a hand gently. "Rosa, she's hungry." Rosa froze, shame flooding her cheeks. "It's my fault. I didn't want to trouble you. I didn't want you to think we were taking advantage. I know you already do so much." Daniel stared at her, baffled. "I don't do anything," he said quietly. "You work here. You earn every cent. You owe me nothing." Rosa lowered her gaze. "We sometimes don't have enough at home. I take extra hours, but..." She stopped, swallowing hard. "I didn't want you to see us like this." Something shifted inside Daniel then. Something he hadn't realized was out of place until this moment. He'd lived in this enormous house for years. Marble floors, towering windows, staff gliding through like shadows. But never once had he stopped to think about the lives behind the uniforms. The silent struggles. The sacrifices they hid with polite smiles. He looked at Anna again, her hungry eyes, her too-thin wrists, her small fingers nervously twisting the hem of her worn sweater. "How long has it been like this?" he asked softly. Rosa flinched. "A while. But please, don't worry. We manage." "You don't manage," Daniel said, shaking his head. "At least, not the way you should have to." He turned toward the kitchen, and without a word, he pulled out more ingredients. Fresh fruit, warm bread, sliced cheese, the kind of things Anna's eyes had never seen on her plate. He arranged the food quickly, but with care, and pushed it gently toward the little girl. "Anna," he said, "eat, please." She glanced up at her mother for permission. Rose's lips trembled as she nodded. And the moment Anna took her first bite, small, hesitant, but filled with yearning, Daniel felt something raw and unexpected spread in his chest. Rosa wiped her eyes discreetly. "I shouldn't have let it come to this." "You shouldn't have had to," Daniel replied. Anna ate quietly. But Daniel noticed something. She wasn't devouring it like a starving child might. She was pacing herself, taking tiny bites, as though saving some for later, as though she always had to. When she reached halfway through the bread, she wrapped the rest carefully in a napkin. "Why are you stopping?" Daniel asked gently. She looked down. "For Mama." Rosa gasped. "Anna, no, eat." Daniel couldn't speak for a moment. It took everything in him to steady his voice. "Anna," he whispered, "you'll never have to save your food again. Not here." The girl blinked at him. "Really? Really?" Rosa brought a trembling hand to her mouth. "Senor Daniel, please, I don't want charity." "This isn't charity," Daniel said quietly. "This is responsibility. My responsibility. You work in my home. Your daughter is under my roof. I should have seen this sooner." Rosa shook her head. "You're not supposed to carry our burdens." Daniel looked her in the eyes. "Maybe not, but I will, as long as you're here. I will." Anna finished her food slowly, her shoulders loosening as warmth replaced the cold fear she'd walked in with. For the first time since he'd met her, Daniel saw a hint of something bright behind her cautious expression. Hope, fragile but alive. He stood up and moved toward the pantry again, gathering more items, snacks, canned food, fresh produce. Rosa's eyes widened. "Senor, what are you doing?" He placed the bags gently in her hands. "Making sure you don't leave here with less than what you need." Rosa clutched the bags against her chest, shaking her head in disbelief. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," Daniel said. "Just promise me something." She looked up, uncertain. Anything. Stop hiding your hunger, he said softly. Yours or hers? The kitchen grew quiet, but not heavy, quiet like the first breath after storm. Anna leaned lightly against her mother, full now, but still watching Daniel with those wide, thoughtful eyes, as it tried to understand the shift happening around her. Daniel wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but tonight, the house felt warmer, softer, more human, and something inside him whispered that this moment, this small, unexpected discovery in his own kitchen, was only the beginning. Rosa gently smoothed Anna's hair as the little girl leaned into her side, full for the first time in days. Daniel watched them for a moment, something settling in his chest that he hadn't realized was missing. It wasn't pity, not even close. It was recognition, awareness, maybe even responsibility, but not the kind that weighed him down, the kind that made him finally feel awake. He gestured toward the dining table. Sit, both of you. Rosa blinked rapidly, startled. No, Senor Daniel, this is your dining room. We can't. It's a table, he said calmly, and you both deserve to sit at it. Anna looked between them, hesitant. She had the wary look of a child who had learned. Far too young. That comfort came with consequences. Daniel pulled out a chair for her anyway. She paused, then climbed into it slowly, as though she half expected it to disappear beneath her. He turned to Rosa next. You too. She opened her mouth to protest again, but when she saw the firmness in his expression, gentle but unmovable, her shoulders sank. She sat beside Anna, unsure where to place her hands, how to breathe, how to exist in this room as anything other than a servant passing through. Daniel took a seat across from them. For a moment, none of them spoke. The large dining hall, usually echoing with nothing but silence, felt different with them sitting there. It felt like a space finally being used for what it was meant for: people, connection, humanity. Daniel leaned his arms on the table. I need you to tell me something honestly, he said, looking at Rosa. How long have things been this difficult for you? Rosa clasped her hands tightly in her lap. Since Anna's father left, she whispered. He went to look for work abroad. Then no calls, no money, nothing. I assumed he found a new life, or didn't want this one anymore. Her smile tightened. So I worked, any hours, any place. And I told Anna, the world is kinder if you take little and ask for nothing. Daniel's jaw clenched. You taught her to survive, not to hide. She hides because I do, Rose admitted, her voice small. It's easier that way. Less attention, less trouble. Anna's voice piped in softly, barely a whisper. Mama says people don't like when kids make noise. Daniel shook his head slowly. This house has never been loud. Maybe it should be. Anna tilted her head, confused. Loud like happy? Daniel felt something crack open inside him. Yeah, he said quietly. Exactly like that. Anna smiled, only slightly, but it was real. Rosa lowered her gaze, fighting tears. Senor Daniel, we don't want to disrupt your life. We're just thankful you let us work here. You're not disrupting anything, Daniel said. You're making me see everything differently. He took a breath before continuing. I grew up believing wealth was walls, he said, tapping his fingers on the polished table. Walls that protected me. Walls that kept problems out. Walls that separated my life from everyone else's. But tonight, I saw what those walls really did. What, senor? Anna asked, her big eyes blinking curiously. They made me blind, he murmured. Blind to what was happening right under my roof. Anna fiddled with a napkin. Sometimes grown-ups don't see things until kids show them. Her innocence hit him deeper than any accusation could have. Rosa looked mortified. Anna! No! Daniel interrupted softly. She's right. Anna watched him as if trying to measure whether adults truly meant the things they said. When she believed him, she lifted her small chin a little higher, the slightest spark of confidence emerging. Daniel stood up and walked to the far cabinet, the one no staff ever touched because it held items reserved for special occasions. He opened it and took out a large crystal bowl, meticulously cut and shimmering in the light. He filled it with fruit, grapes, strawberries, slices of melon, setting it in front of Anna like a small treasure. Her eyes widened. For me? Yes. She looked up at her mother again. Rosa nodded, though she seemed overwhelmed. Anna reached in, took a single grape, and placed on her tongue with delicate care. She savored it, as though she'd never tasted anything so sweet. Then she took another, and quietly slid one across the table toward Daniel. He blinked. What's this for? You look tired, she said softly. Maybe you need sweetness too. For a second, he couldn't speak. Rosa closed her eyes, whispering something in Spanish under her breath. Gratitude, apology, awe. He couldn't tell. Daniel picked up the grape and ate it. Thank you, Anna, he said. It's perfect. Anna's smile returned, bigger this time. The room warmed again. After a long moment, Daniel rose from his chair. Come with me, he said. Both of you. Rosa hesitated but followed, clutching Anna's hand. Daniel led them down the hall, past a gallery of expensive art, past the cold marble pillars, until they reached the guest wing. He stopped in front of the door and opened it. Soft lighting, fresh linens, a comfortable bed, a small sofa, a warm rug, a room with dignity. Rosa looked confused. Senor, why are we here? This is your room, Daniel said. From now on, Rosa's breath caught. No, this is too much. It's not enough, he said firmly. Not after tonight. Anna stepped inside, her fingers brushing the soft blankets as though she'd never touched anything so gentle. Mama, she whispered, can we really stay here? Rosa swallowed hard, tears filling her eyes. I don't know. Daniel placed a hand against the doorframe. You can, he said, and you will. Rosa's voice broke. Why are you doing this for us? Daniel looked at Anna, then at the woman who worked quietly in his home for years, raising a child alone, hiding her struggles from a man who'd never bothered to look deeply enough to see them. Because, he said quietly, no one under my roof should ever have to hide their hunger, or their child, or their pain. Anna walked back to him, small hands tugging at the hem of his sleeve. Does this mean, she whispered, we're safe now? Daniel knelt to meet her eyes. Yes, Anna, he said gently. You're safe. But even as he said the words, something else began to stir beneath the surface. Something he did not yet fully see. Because this night, this moment, was only the beginning of a story neither of them could have imagined. The house felt different in the days that followed. Warmer, less hollow, as if the walls themselves had begun to breathe again. Daniel moved the halls with a new awareness, noticing everything he had once ignored. The quiet exhaustion in Rosa's steps, the way Anna's laughter slowly began to echo through what used to be silent rooms, the gentleness the little girl brought to every corner she touched. What began as an act of kindness had gradually become something deeper, an awakening. But the true turning point came one late evening as rain hammered against the windows in fierce, restless waves. Daniel had just returned from a board meeting, exhausted, his mind heavy. He loosened his tie, threw his jacket across the sofa, and was about to collapse into bed when he heard a soft, panicked cry from down the hallway. Anna's room. He rushed there without thinking. Inside, the little girl sat upright on her bed. Trembling, her small hands clutched against her chest as tears streamed down her face. Rosa knelt beside her, rubbing her back, whispering soothing words, but Anna's fear was too strong. Her breaths came in sharp, painful gasps. Daniel didn't know what he felt first. Fear, concern, or something deeper that struck straight through him. He stepped into the room. Anna? What's wrong? The little girl looked up at him through tears, and in that moment, the walls she kept around her heart finally cracked open. I dreamed Mama was gone, she sobbed, choking on the words. I dreamed I woke up and she disappeared, just like Papa. And I was alone in the streets, hungry, and no one saw me. No one helped me. Her voice broke into uncontrollable crying. Rosa tried to speak, but her own tears silenced her. Daniel didn't think. He simply sat beside them and took the little girl into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, trembling like a frightened bird. He held her until her breathing calmed, his hand resting gently on her back, feeling every shiver. You're not going anywhere, Daniel murmured. Your mother is right here, and you're not alone. Not now. Not ever. Anna sniffed, her voice fragile. But people leave. Not everyone, he said quietly. And I'm not leaving either. Rosa looked at him then, startled by the depth in his voice. She had always seen him as distant, polite, respectful, but now there was something else in his eyes, something unspoken and powerful. When Anna finally drifted back to sleep, her tiny hand curled around Daniel's sleeve, refusing to let go. Rosa watched from the doorway, the weight of years of struggle etched across her face. You didn't have to stay, she whispered. I couldn't leave, he admitted. Rosa exhaled shakily. We've always been careful. People like us, we don't have room for mistakes. We don't have the luxury of breaking down or needing help. Her voice cracked. But she's just a child. She shouldn't have to be strong all the time. Daniel glanced at Anna, her lashes still wet from tears. No child should. Slowly, Rosa sat on the edge of the bed. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, he said. You've given more than you realize. Rosa frowned, confused. What have I given? He looked at her, truly looked at her, and his voice softened. Your loyalty, your kindness, your strength. And you raised a daughter with so much heart that she changed the atmosphere of this entire house within days. Rosa blinked, surprised. Daniel continued, You survived so much alone, but you don't have to be alone anymore. She stared at him then, at the man who had once seemed unreachable behind layers of wealth and steel, and she saw someone changed. Someone opening doors she never expected. Days turned into weeks, and what began as a simple act of compassion grew into something far more profound. Daniel didn't just provide food or shelter. He became involved. He spent evenings helping Anna with schoolwork, mornings sitting with Rosa over coffee, learning pieces of her story she had never shared with anyone. He began to laugh more, breathe more, live more. And soon, the staff noticed too. The house seemed to rearrange itself, opening its spaces, softening its edges, becoming a home instead of a mansion. But the moment everything truly shifted happened, on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The sun streamed through the windows in golden ribbons, casting a warm glow across the living room. Anna sat on the carpet coloring, humming to herself, a sound Daniel had grown to love, and Rosa stood by the window folding laundry. Daniel walked in holding a small envelope. He cleared his throat nervously, something he rarely did. I have something for both of you, he said. Rosa looked up. What is it? He handed her the envelope. She opened it and gasped. Inside was a printed document, simple yet life-changing. It stated that Rosa was no longer an hourly maid. She was now the full-time household manager, with triple her previous salary, full health care, and job security. Rosa's lips trembled. This is too much. It's not, Daniel said firmly. It's what you deserve. She stared at the paper as though it might vanish. Senor Daniel, why would you do this? Because you're the backbone of this home, he answered. Because Anna deserves stability. Because you both deserve dignity. And because his eyes softened as he looked at the little girl smiling up at him from the floor. Because you changed me. Anna ran to him, wrapping her arms around his leg with pure, innocent joy. Does this mean we stay forever? He bent down and hugged her tightly. If you want to. Tears streamed down Rosa's face, not of sadness, but of release. Years of fear, hunger, loneliness, all dissolving in a single moment of security. Daniel stood, looking at the two lives he had unknowingly been entrusted with, and realized something profound. He had saved them, but they had saved him first. In the echo of that truth, the mansion, once cold and echoing, finally became what it was always meant to be, a family's home. And deep inside, Daniel understood that every path in his life, every lonely night, every empty success had been leading him right here, to this mother, to this child, to this new beginning that was no longer built on wealth, but on love. And the story they started together was only just beginning.